first thing I do is lay it out around the radius of the shell, and I cut little notches right where the grooves are going to go, and that's just like the beginning of the spokes. And then I start filing. I've got two of the grooves cut, and they're kind of curved. They're both opposite each other in the curve, so I'm just kind of giving it a more organic flow, I think I would call it. These points are going to go away. They're going to round in radius, as these will be radiused. And there'll be other things, but I'll show in a minute. One of the first things you got to figure out is how to hold the thing. And I got myself a little clamp made that goes through the slot, and it's already an S shape. I wouldn't even try to file this until I get it into an S shape because of the geometry here. It works better for your filing. You're not going to scratch up what you've already got finished. So it's 90% finished between the shells down through here. And so that's why you see the tape, just to keep myself from slipping and scratching. But I'm going to show you some more pictures as I go along. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I've made a little bit more progress. I have got the initial grooves cut and tracked into their place. And I will, as I go along with the next filings, and I will stay in those grooves, but I'll just refine the grooves. But I'm watching constantly to see that I'm tracking on the course, and if there's any need to drift one way or the other, then I lean that way. I don't mean actually lean my bodies, but I will if I have to. But I put pressure to the side to drift that groove to the correct direction if necessary. And you can see how the grooves plane off the backside and miss that curve, miss the finished part back here. That's the value of waiting until you get the S curve in the main guard before you file the shell. We'll do a little bit more and make some progress and see what it looks like. By the way, this is stainless steel. Okay, I have started to round each of those ridges that are in the shell, and I'm bringing them back and letting them cross. Now they will be, that little scratch over run of the grooves, that'll be taken care of with a different groove that goes across. But I have just started roughing in the ridges, and I hesitate to call them flutes because they're not concave, they're convex. And I will radius each of these little ridges as they come off the edge, front edge. Right now they're kind of blocky looking and unfinished. And actually the surface is unfinished on these, so they'll be polished out. So my goal is to make everything flow toward the center and have just a little bit of a curve and work toward the middle and work with the shape of the shell. Try to make it look as natural as possible. It won't be natural. It won't be an identical copy of a natural shell. But the idea and the impression is that it's a shell. And that's really the point, is we are impressionists in some sense. So if we can make it look natural, and the human eye will be drawn to it, and it will look nice, it will have a lot of sparkle to it, then we've accomplished our purpose. Let me do a little bit more work and we'll see how it goes. Thank you. A little bit farther along now, not very far, but I've added the perpendicular groove across the guard, and that terminates each of these grooves that come over and fan down into a kind of a point, and it allows me to come back and most likely I won't be scratching the guard back in here. If I do, I'll of course refinish that, and it'll all come together at that groove that I just put in. And there'll be two other grooves to kind of mimic a shell. And I'm not a expert on the shells. I just mean to say that when you have a place here and say here, what can you do with those? You can either cut a groove in them, or you can polish them proud as they come up and over. And I'll decide what I'm going to do with that. In fact, there's a few things on this shell that I'm doing different than I normally would. I say normally, I'm using that word loosely because I'm not an expert. I am curving all of these little ridges. So from the center out, they flare. If you'll remember, recently I showed a Damascus blade where it's got a 1084 core, and it's got a Damascus with a 15 and 20 in between it and the core, and it kind of has some curved flare to the pattern. And so I'm kind of drawing a little bit of influence from that for this guard. Let me just kind of roll over here, and I wear this glove for mainly to protect my hand, so if I slip with the file, I won't jab myself or run it across the knuckle. But you can kind of see where I'm going with it, and I'll get a little bit farther along and we'll look at it in just a second. A quick point about the file that I'm using, and I've turned it around in the vise so that I can have access to these little parts, and I'm going to radius each of those little sections and try to make them look natural as possible. This file is just a small parallel file, 1/2 inch by 1/8. It's a Grow Babe brand, and it has a safe side or a safe edge, and that's important. So when you put the safe edge down and you work to the right, you're not messing up the one on the left. And if you go the other way from right to left out of the notch, you're not messing up the one you've just done. So you may have your own system of filing from left to right, right to left. I have to do it both ways, from center out, or I'll get out of center or something. And it's not perfect, but it will be okay. The way it's setting, it generally looks like a shell, and everything we do to it is going to work towards center and flow, center and flow. So pick your tools wisely, be patient with yourself, don't expect perfection. It will work out. Okay, let's look at this. You can easily see that I've worked on the right three petals, or whatever you want to call those, of the shell. Now you can see the profile is more radiused. It's not blocky and square. I have not only radiused them, but I have put a little bit of a bias toward the right side, if you will. When I come over here, I'll put the bias the other direction, and it'll all meet in the middle. And that middle will be more symmetrical. It'll serve as the anchor for the pattern. And I can see that my groove on the left side of that particular one is just a little more swing to the curve toward the center, and I'll do that as I file. But I'm making the changes as I go. I'm watching it everything again is drifting toward flow and center. So let's get a little bit more done. Just a word about polishing the shell guard or anything that's got a bunch of detail and some grooves and complex shapes. You probably need a Fordham tool. I have one, and I use a variety of rubberized abrasives, and I shape them the shape of that groove before I put it down in there and start polishing. I try to polish all the way to the very bottom of those grooves. So you may have to redress the abrasive from time to time. You may go through 2 or 3 of them in doing one of these guards. This end is not done yet. I'll start on that next. But you try to go over every part of that is with the same stage or step, same grit, same abrasive, same everything, and polish it evenly. And if you can't buff it or polish it with a compound on the buffer, then you need to have some kind of a means to do it with that Fordham tool. And it's important that you just get the detail as close as possible. And I wanted it to contrast with the satin finish of the front and the back of the guard. The sides will be polished, and that contrast looks good to me. But this is basically the steps and stages of how I get a shell guard. And again, you need to see that profile to know how a file can plane off and miss these curves. That's how you can access all those grooves and file that shape. So take your time. It'll take all day for me to get these 2 shell carved in and polished. And then I'll do a once over or twice over with over the whole thing before I think it's ready to move on. But thank y'all for watching. Like and subscribe. I appreciate it. And again, I appreciate Ben, my son, for editing the videos. And I will soon have this knife finished, but be patient with me. It'll take a couple of days. Thanks a lot.